alignment situation really comes down to getting the rod to hit these switches properly. And so you're going to want to now install the witch, and you can do that by going back up, putting the playfield down, going back up to the top, and threading it back down through like the opposite of how you removed it. Now you'll have the new witch installed, and so you're going to want to be extra careful about pushing it down in there. What you can do is just put it in a little bit until you get to that place where it sort of gets a little tough to push. Just go a little bit more so you can feel that rod get into this motor here. And once it's in there, you can then use the buttons in the test menu to lower the witch if you'd want to do that. Now, word of caution, the first time you do this, you'll want to be very careful. These switches need to be aligned. They may not be set up for your game and how your rod is bent and everything's attached. You do want to make sure that this guy's on all the way and it's secure and it's all the way over the bracket, because if it's not in alignment, the rod won't go down properly. But if you sort of see, that rod is meant to come right straight down through all this stuff. And that's what you're going to want to look to align to. There are a few adjustments here you can make. These switches can be moved through the screws on the bottom. You can easily get there with a little screwdriver to move those screws while it's installed, and you can adjust it. What you might want to do is loosen these switches up and push them out of the way all the way to this side, and then lower the rod through. That way it has no possibility of getting caught on those guys, and again, you can be watching it from the underside of the playfield using the test menu. You can actually see the menus on the game if you look around the side here while you're doing this. So you'll want to lower the rod through, make sure it doesn't hit on this, make sure it goes through this hole, and make sure it doesn't do anything to mess this switch up. Once it's down in there, then you can use it as a gauge to where you want to put the switches. Ideally, you want to have them angled. You can see that my back one is more angled, and you can tell that it's pointed this direction. This one, it depends on how your rod comes in and how the switch is bent, but you can go either way just depending on what you're trying to accomplish out of it. Basically, you want to have the top of the switches, so with this tang pressed all the way in, like that, you want to have the rod sort of right alongside here so that when it comes in, it pushes that just far enough that it clicks. I'm sure you can, I don't know if you can hear that clicking. You know what it's like. So you want it to do there and there as well. This one's much more forgiving because you can just have this huge bend in the switch and you can easily contact it. The rod doesn't need to contact the switch way back here at the fulcrum of it. It just needs to push this tang far enough to make that click. So you have to make sure that that click's happening. If that click's not happening, then the mod is never going to know when the witch is going up and down. It's going to act all wonky. You can fake it and test these out, and I'll give you an idea of what the movement is normally like in the game and how the mod responds to that. So basically, the game will start when you first turn it on. The witch will go up, and she'll be up while the game is not in use. That's the default, I think. I don't know if you can change that. When you start a game, she comes down. So theoretically, the first starting point of the witch is like this. This is the down switch, and that's the up switch. So we're like that. That means that the witch is all the way down. When the witch starts going up, that switch opens up. That tells the mod that the witch is now going up, grow the flames. When the witch gets all the way to the top, that switch is triggered and opened up, and that tells the mod the witch is up. So the flames will be going on, or whatever effect you chose will be happening at that point. And no matter what, however the witch ends up dying or not, the rod will come down and then contact this switch, which tells the mod that the witch is now going down, shrink the flames, and then it will hit this switch, which tells the mod the witch is down, fade out the lights if they're still on at all, and then just wait. So you can test that sequence. It has a little bit of bounce in it, so you can't just flick the switches really quick, but you can test that sequence off the game by plugging in the USB connector. and I'll show you a little bit of that in another video. So the next one, we'll look at testing this guy out, what the effects are, how to set the colors, all that sort of thing. You probably, I mean, I should have mentioned this earlier, you might want to do that before you put this all in the game. It's just a little bit difficult to do in the game. I have a post right here, so it's even more difficult, but you'll have to look around or peer up through that hole, which is not very easy to do, to see when you change the effects with those buttons. Like I said, this all doesn't have to be attached in here for you to test this out. You could have everything out and still plug it into the power down here and just mess around with it using the game power. Or again, you can plug in the USB plug right to there, as long as it has voltage up to 5 volts. I don't remember what USB plugs have. I know they have some that are very low voltage, but then it should be able to power everything. So you're going to go into the test mode. You can sort of see it. I'm in test mode there, and I'm in the device test and the witch test, and you can use the up and down, two red keys on the door keypad to move this guy up and down, move the witch up and down. And so you can get a sense. I'm just going to push it just a little bit at a time here, and I'm just looking to see like how it's going to interact with that switch, etc. You can, I mean, there's no real easy way to do this outside of doing it like this that I found, but the idea is basically you're trying to make it so that when it hits that first switch, it pushes it closed without getting snagged there. And you can see how mine's bent to give it sort of a slope for the rod to hit onto that switch tang, and then for it to push that tang down. So here's what you'll see. And you probably heard that click there, hopefully, and that's the switch actuating, and that's what you need to hear. If you don't hear the click, if it's not actuating, then it's not enough. And you can see that this switch could be tilted different directions, and that tang could be bent different ways to make it so that it's giving it the best alignment possible to push that down all the way. I haven't really spent a lot of time aligning this. I just made it work. I put the rod all the way down. First I loosened the screws on both switches, moved them out of the way, put the rod all the way down, and then just used the switches themselves to push them up against the rod to see where they needed to be aligned, and then tighten down the screws. That's really, I mean, it should be pretty simple like that, although you may need to do a little testing and back and forth on the switches and how they're bent. But we did bend them originally for you a little bit. Of course, it's up to each rod. In the front, I have that big curve on mine that goes around the front of the switch. That gives it that ramp for the rod to hit. And then on the back one, it's just this sort of straight angle, giving it that piece to push down on. You just don't want the rod to catch on the end here when it tries to come back up. So just make sure it doesn't hit that. Otherwise, that is the alignment that you'll need to do on here. And you can just use the buttons here, and you can hear it hit that one as well. And so when you're ready, when you think you have it all ready, just run through this test a few times and just make sure you hear the 2 clicks happening. If those 2 clicks are happening, you're set.
What would you do with a brain if you had one?
Do? Why, if I had a brain, I could while away the hours, conferring with the flowers, consulting with the rain.